Hello, and welcome to a very special book club that Tattered Cover is partnering with VF, who I believe most of you or all of you on this virtual event work for. My name is Adam. I am the director of events with Tattered Cover, and I just want to thank you and VF for doing this because Tattered Cover is 50 years old. It's a really special thing to have an independent bookstore be around for half a century. So it's thanks to authors like our guests tonight, companies like VF, and then readers all across the country, to be honest with you, across the world, that keeps us going. So thank you. If you're interested in more virtual events or in person, because I believe a lot of you are going to be from Denver, we do have some in-person events coming up, COVID safety, masks on, but check out tatteredcover.com/events. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to turn over to Maddie and Ariel, who I think is going to talk more about the book club and more about tonight's guest, but please enjoy. Any questions you have for Reyna, please put them in the YouTube chat and I will get them to the book club hosts. Thank you. Ladies, please take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. My name is Maddie Eichholtz. I'm the co-chair of the community pillar at ACE Diversity, and I lead our ACE Diversity book club. I want to thank everyone for joining us today in our first Meet the Author event with Reyna Grande. Reyna's memoir, The Distance Between Us, was voted as this month's book selection for this year's Hispanic Heritage Month celebrations, and I'm so thankful that it was. This book club has been a bit of a passion project for us over the last few months. We created it as an opportunity to build community virtually and share the joy of education and reading with one another. I want to give a special thanks to Tattered Cover for their partnership these last few months. As we launch this book club, we have a lot of really fun, interesting ideas for the future, especially once we can be back in person. So definitely more to come. If you're not part of the book club yet and you want to be, feel free to reach out to me individually or reach out to the ACE Denver email. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce both our moderator, Ariel Cuevas, and our author guest, Reyna Grande. Ariel is a quality coordinator for Jansport and Eagle Creek. She's empathetic, courageous, and a hilarious leader. She co-leads the Latinx Affinity Group with ACE Diversity, is chair of the Woven Culture Pillar, and is a member of the Jansport and Eagle Creek Justice and Equity Council. Her passion is unmatched, so it's with many thanks that I welcome her today as our moderator. Reyna Grande is an award-winning author, motivational speaker, and writing teacher. Born in Mexico in the 70s, she was raised by her grandparents after her parents left to work in the US. She came to the US at the age of 9 as an undocumented immigrant and went on to become the first person in her family to obtain a higher education. Reyna has more than 4 published works and has contributed to many others, and I believe she has another one coming soon. Maybe we'll hear more about that today. She's now a mother, educator, creative, and truly an inspiration. It is such an honor for me to welcome her today as our first guest.
Yes, thank you so much, Maddie. That was a very special introduction. Thank you so much. I
Of course.
don't know how to match that, but I appreciate it. As May said, thank you so much, Reyna, for joining us. We had a conversation right before this webinar, this event, and with a few of our members, and it was already an emotional conversation about your memoir. It was very beautiful, very touching. I really appreciate all the honesty and the transparency that you put into your book, and I'm actually really excited to read more of the books that you've written. But yeah, before we get into the details of the book, maybe it's just me, but I think everything's symbolic. So on the cover of your book, can you explain why you chose this image and the pink? I don't know if the color is a certain some symbolism that you picked, but I thought that it speak to me in many different ways. But I wanted to get your opinion on why you chose that.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, actually, authors don't really get to pick their book covers.
Oh.
It's the art department who designs the covers. And usually we get like maybe 1, sometimes 2 or 3 options. And they'll ask us like, which one do we like? And but with this one in particular, I did not get any to choose from. They just sent me that one, and they said, here's the cover, here's what we're doing. And I did not get to say whether or not I liked it or not. They just went with it.
Oh,
Yeah. So that wasn't my idea. And yeah, I think usually though they do send us a few options.
yeah.
And for example, with my new book that's coming out in March, I actually got 4 different options.
Wow.
And I was able to take, something that I like from one of them, and then the colors from another, and then an image from another, and they were able to then like put the final one together. Yeah.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So the cover, throughout the book reading your memoir, we discussed, we have to remind ourselves it's a memoir, and like we're putting ourselves in and immersing ourselves into your details, and you did a great job, putting us in the actual environment. And so every time I was reading a new chapter, I would always like reference the cover, because I'm like, there has to be some type of meaning. So I mean, to me, it was helping me through the journey. But yeah, also, I did mention that your writing is very unique and immersive, and you can actually put yourself in the environment, in the situation. Were there any artists growing up or authors that inspired you on your writing technique, or in general, as a person? It doesn't have to be your writing, but who has the biggest influence in your life?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a bunch of things, because when I was young, I really loved fairy tales and folk tales. And, like I write in my book, that when I lived with my maternal grandmother, we didn't have television. So we would listen to the radio and story time on the radio. And I really loved it and I'm actually glad I didn't have television when I was little, because I feel it really helped me to develop my imagination more.
Right.
But I could visualize, I listened to the story on the radio, and I could like visualize the story and what was happening. So then when I came here to the US, I was very fortunate that my community had a public library, because then I was able to have access to books. And I read a lot. Like I read all of their fairy tale collections. And then from there, I moved on to reading like other books, for young readers. But I just love to read, and I love being able to imagine things, like, what things look like. But I would say Sandra Cisneros, The House on Mango Street, is one of the books that really impacted me. When I discovered the book, I was 19. So, I mean, a lot of kids get to read The House on Mango Street in elementary school, so I kind of came to it late. But I guess I found the book right when I needed it. So anyway, House on Mango Street was one. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran was another book that I really loved. The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand was another book I loved. And then when I went to UC Santa Cruz, I took Chicano literature class, and I got to read Juan Rulfo, and I really loved Juan Rulfo. He's a Mexican writer who writes about poverty in a way that I could actually relate to.
Yeah.
So he had an impact on me as well. And I just love, I think the books I love are books that are just very lyrical. Like, I don't read poetry. I wish I read more poetry, but I read books where the prose is poetic,
Right.
and that's kind of what I really enjoy reading.
That's beautiful. I wrote down The House on Mango Street. It sounds very familiar, and I don't know why I haven't read it yet, but I've tried to write as many as down as you were talking, so that I can relay this to our members as well, because I know they're probably jotting down as well as they're watching this. But so getting to the book a little bit, your memoir was very relatable to me, only because I look up to my mother a lot, you know, and a lot of her story. Hopefully, she's not watching this, and I'm gonna get in trouble for saying any of this. But growing up, it was very hard. Having very traditional Mexican family as well, and there was a divide between her family and her parents, and actually made me really emotional. It made me actually relate to my mother more on her struggles, and what you have went through. You've kind of put me into a position to where it made me a little bit more understanding, and it was powerful, to be honest. And I had to call my mom and just say, I had, no idea, I told her about this author. I sent her a book, by the way. And I was like, this author is amazing. You're definitely going to you totally relate. So I just wanted to thank you. You kind of brought a part of my Mexican history and my Mexican family heritage to light. I've been on, not to talk more about me, but I've been on a journey to understand, the little secrets that were hidden in my family as to, my grandparents as well. So I just thought that, I was just a little curious. I could feel the tension grow with your mother as a result of her decisions, especially as you grew older. So I'm curious, has your relationship with your mother changed since you've become a mother yourself? And how have your experiences as a child impacted the way you were a parent and the way you move through life? Whoop, there you go.
That's a great question about my mom. For some reason, when it comes to my dad, like I don't have such a complicated relationship with him, even though my dad passed away 10 years ago, but I seem to be okay with him. I don't like have lingering resentment or grudges or whatever, with my dad. And with my mom, I'm still kind of working on it. I think because I keep, and I stopped doing this, or I tried to stop doing it, where I'm constantly expecting my mother to behave a certain way. And then when she doesn't, I'm disappointed. And I realized I was setting myself up for disappointment all the time, because I had to stop expecting my mother to behave the way I wanted her to behave. It's never gonna happen. That's just not who my mother is. So then at some point I had to just tell myself, she is who she is, and that's that, right? There's really nothing I can do. She's not gonna change. So once I told myself that, we were good. Like I've been able to have a relationship with her where I don't have expectations. I let her be. And it's been good that way. I think we've been getting along well because of that. But she's definitely, she hasn't changed a whole lot. And I had hope when she became a grandma, she would redeem herself and become like the best grandma in the world. And yeah, that didn't happen. So my kids don't really have much of a relationship with her. And obviously the distance hasn't helped. We moved out of LA almost 6 years ago. So my mom's still in LA, and we don't really see her that much. I mean, even like right now, like with COVID and everything, we haven't seen her in almost 2 years. So the distance hasn't helped.
Has it helped for you therapeutically? The distance, sometimes when you're not in the same city, it's a little bit more of a relief. You're like, you know what, you're a phone call away, and that's as best as I can do right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I was reading the book, and I also noticed that you had a very distinction between abuela and abuelita.
Mm.
And I caught on that. That was something personal that I caught on to very quickly. And I just thought that another relatable situation was, my maternal grandmother wasn't the best. And as you put it, it was like she was trying to scare you, correct? Like your your abuela, Avila, was more of the, just not so, I guess, loving and just, yeah. But my maternal grandmother, she's my abuela. And my paternal grandmother is my abuelita. And that was very separate. I could tell a difference. And that was kind of a request for my abuelita because she knew how much I was scared of my abuela. She's like, just call her abuela and tell me her reaction, but in Spanish. And so I saw that, how you've put that in there. And I guess it could be like an Easter egg for our own culture. Can you explain a little bit why you did separate the difference between the two, abuela and abuelita? And we read, your relationship between the two, but if you can just elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, with my paternal grandmother, we just never really developed a good relationship. She was a difficult woman to live with, and just not loving at all, emotionally unavailable, and she made us feel so bad, like living with her. We developed such a low self-esteem living with her. So I didn't, abuelita is somebody that you call when you really love that person and you have a good relationship. So I never felt like calling her abuelita. I just call her abuela.
Yeah.
Yes, my maternal grandmother, abuelita Chinta, I mean, I adored her, and she was just the nicest grandma. And I feel so bad that, part of what I lost when I immigrated was my relationship with my abuelita. Like I never had her again, It was like I had to grow up without her. And then when I finally went back to Mexico to visit her, it wasn't the same anymore. And I only saw her like a handful of times before she passed away. So that's one of my biggest regrets, really, is having lost that relationship that I had with my grandma.
You're gonna make me cry over here because
I'm making myself cry.
my abuelita was my best friend, and I kind of want to like cry because that was my regret. She passed away in 2017 and no, 2014. I'm sorry, that's my father. 2014, and I regret, just I lived in the Bay Area. She lived, I was in college and just prioritizing different. And my regret is not seeing her enough and having more conversations, and asking more and just about her, and yeah, you're putting you're right on the money on that. And I saw the photo you had posted of your abuelita's shack, and it just, even though it's a shack, I can feel that love of that photograph. And because you can, just from your words and the way you described her and the way that you lived with her, you can still feel the love, even though it's considered a shack, You did a good job, but all right. Well, I know for many that creativity and writing is sometimes the first chance to truly express themselves. Did you find writing to be a therapeutic expression, and did it help understanding and processing your experiences? Also, I'm curious, did documenting your experiences change your perspective on any of the events or change your feelings or understandings of circumstances, particularly your childhood events now that you're an adult? Yeah.
Yeah, well, with the writing, I mean, I think that's why I started to write, was because I discovered that it was a really great way for me to try to cope with what was going on in my life.
Right.
And I would write in my journals all the time about what was going on, how I felt. So it became my favorite way of self-expression. And then because I was such an avid reader, I started to write stories and make up stories. So I wasn't just writing about the things that were happening to me, but then I started to create characters and give them a lot of my experiences. So that's how I started venturing into like fiction. But I really love writing. I didn't see myself as a writer, or I didn't like really see being a professional writing as part of my future until I got to community college and I met my professor Diana Savas, and she was the one who put that idea in my head that I could be a professional writer. And it was because of her that I decided to major in creative writing and actually, really work on my craft as a writer. So after that, my relationship to writing changed a little bit in that I wasn't just doing it for therapy. I was now doing it because I wanted to turn this interest of mine into a possible career. And I devoted myself to like learning everything I could about the craft. And now it's interesting because now my relationship to writing has changed again, in that I've discovered that writing can be an act of advocacy, that I could actually, you know, try to advocate for my community and to like fight for social justice and social change through the act of writing. So I see it as an act of activism now. So that has kind of, it's interesting how like my relationship to my writing has evolved through
Right.
time.
Right.
Mm.
With your complex family dynamic, were you hesitant at first to share your writing, or your story, or were you just comfortable from the beginning? I know you said that, your writing has evolved, and because of your mentor, it's made you a little bit more confident as to put yourself out there.
Yeah. Well, I think with my siblings, I've always felt comfortable sharing my work with them. Um, yeah, since I was younger, I like to share my stories with them, and then they read like all my books. I always share my books with them even before they're published. They'll read them. So to me, like that has always been such a blessing, to be able to share my work with my siblings and to feel supported that way. And they're my fans. So it's always nice to have that.
That is good.
Yeah. I think it's more like with my mom, for example. Sometimes I'm uncomfortable sharing my work with her, especially like when the distance between us came out. I hesitated giving her a copy of the book just because I knew that it was gonna hurt her. And she asked to read it, and I couldn't like keep it from her. So I gave her a copy and she read the whole thing. And then yeah, I mean, she told me that it was painful, but that she understood that this was my truth that I needed to tell. And you know and that was that. Like, she didn't talk about it again. So that's good.
Yeah, there was no family meeting about it. It was just kind of but I think, acknowledging it was good enough,
Mhm.
for that moment, and it wasn't talked about again. So that's interesting to hear. My if whether she was on there, but my mother would have totally made that a grudge and not stop talking about it. So
Mm.
yeah, that's the difference. But so I think Maddie had mentioned this to you earlier, but a big theme for our ACE group this year is the intersectionality of culture, ethnicity, and race with the outdoors. what role do you think the environment of or outdoors has played in your journey, or maybe it hasn't held significance and that's okay? But yeah.
Well, I think when I lived in LA, before I went off to Santa Cruz for college, I didn't really care that much about the the environment or nature or whatever.
Yeah.
But then when I went to UC Santa Cruz, which is like one of the most beautiful universities in the world.
Go banana slugs.
Yes. And I seriously thought I had stepped into a fairy tale, because it's this beautiful university built in a redwood forest. And
Yeah.
as you're walking to class, there's deer walking around, and it's so idyllic. It's just beautiful. And of course, in Santa Cruz, the the community there is so focused, right, on preserving the environment. So like everybody loves trees and everybody recycles and composts. Like I had never even heard the word compost until I got to Santa Cruz. And recycling, I didn't know about recycling. I mean, my mother, she would like gather like cans and bottles and cardboard and go sell them at the recycle.
Right.
I thought that's what recycling meant, right? That you take your cans and bottles and you get money for it.
Right.
But in Santa Cruz, I learned that what recycling is.
Mm.
And then of course I met like my first vegetarian and vegan friends and all of that. So living and like being exposed to that kind of environment then made me like feel more connected to nature. And after that experience of living there in Santa Cruz for 3 years, I went back to LA with a newfound admiration for nature and appreciation for nature. And I was really disappointed because in LA, everybody is so addicted to their green grass, and just wasting water on grass. And I remember my neighbors, they were really unhappy when I took off all the grass and put in drought tolerant plants and rocks, and they told me my yard looked ugly. Um, and then I remember like when the city cut down 400 mature trees so that the space shuttle Endeavour could be moved from LAX to the museum. And they cut down 400 trees for the stupid shuttle to fit. And I was so disappointed in the city. I think that's when I was done living in LA. Like I could not live there anymore. So anyway, long answer long answer to tell you that I really love the outdoors and I'm a huge gardener now, and I have um a beautiful garden that I just love to spend time in.
Therapeutic. Yeah. Similar experience in my background. It wasn't until I started living in the Bay Area. I'm like, same thing with compost, I'm in from the valley, basically. I mean, you were in Los Angeles, but same thing, it's even though it's part of the same state, different ways of living, different lifestyle. So I went to when I went to the Bay Area for college and stayed out there for the majority of my adult life, I was like, you do what? And you have to put 2 separate bins or we're going to get fined. What? So it was like you said, it's definitely gives you more of a appreciation. And, I always went home, even though it was like a 2-hour drive. I'd always go home and like, you know what, you guys need to start doing this. My family like, okay, Bay Area. So yeah, that's funny that it's like the difference of just, noticing these small things, but big impacts,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So lastly, I'm curious, how do you feel about your immigration story in light of everything that's going on today? Do you ever have a moment of comparing the American immigration then versus now? And if so, what does that look like?
Oh yeah. Well, I think all the time, I feel like I suffer from survivor's guilt because nowadays the immigrants of today are dealing with so much hardship, and there's like four outcomes usually, four potential outcomes for immigrants today is either they'll end up detained, deported, disappeared, or dead, you know? And I think about that all the time. And like, once in a while, like you'll read a story about a child that was found drowned in the Rio Grande, or a child that was found dead from dehydration in the desert. And I'm always thinking like that could have been me, that could have been me, that could have been my fate, my destiny. I could have ended up dead there, or I could have ended up detained if I had immigrated today. I mean, they would have taken us from our father when we got caught, um, or ended up deported, like all these different scenarios that I think about. And I definitely feel that even though I faced a lot of challenges as an immigrant, it's nowhere near to what immigrants of today are dealing with.
Yeah.
And it makes me really sad that we have gone this past 30 some years since I immigrated, like things have just gone from bad to worse for immigrants. So to me, like that's just something that really disappoints me, and it also makes me want to keep writing these books about immigration, because I really hope that if I could change even like one person's thinking about immigrants, I feel that's something.
Yeah. All right. Well, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us. I'm so honored to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and I bet there's a lot of people jealous that I'm having this one-on-one with you, basically. But before we move to Q&A, I wanted to ask, what's next for you? I know that you showed us a sneak peek of a book that's coming out, but where can we find you? Where is your Instagram, Facebook?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Um, I'm there usually, and my website, reynagrande.com. You can go there too for any updates or events that I have coming up, or my books. I actually have 2 books coming out next year. This one, my novel, A Ballad of Love and Glory,
Okay.
is coming out in March.
Okay, keep you on the books.
This is my pride and joy, because it took me 7 years to write this thing, and it was like the most challenging book I've ever had to write in my life. But I'm so happy with it. Like, I just love how the story turned out, so I'm really proud of it. And this is a novel set during the Mexican-American War, so it's my first historical fiction, and it deals with a moment in history that here in the US has been forgotten. The Mexican-American War, which in Mexico is called the US invasion, which, because that's what it was an invasion where Mexico ended up losing half of its territory. And I wanted to write about this particular moment because I feel that the more we can remember our history and learn, about the complicated history between Mexico and the United States, we can maybe start to rethink how we have what we think about the Mexican community living here in this country, and remember that Mexicans are native to this land. I mean, right now where I'm sitting, it used to be Mexico. So I don't know why, like, all my life that I lived here in the United States, I've always been made to feel like an outsider, like a foreigner, where this used to be Mexican lands. So why do I need to feel like an outsider when I'm really not? So anyway, this novel is about that. about the border dispute that went on to turn into this 2-year war. And at the end of it, of course, Mexico was half the country it used to be. And then the other book that I have coming out in June is a collection of essays and poems and artwork that I co-edited. It's called Somewhere We Are Human. And that collection is undocumented voices. So everybody, all the contributors, the 2 co-editors, even the person who designed the book cover is or was undocumented.
Well, I'm definitely have those as part of our next book club list. But yeah, also one more question. How are your siblings doing? I know that everyone's thinking, like, I know you mentioned them earlier, like they're your #1 fans. And if you could just give us an update, I think it's kind of one of those readers, like, how's everybody doing? Where's everybody up to? So right before you go in the Q&A.
Well, I mean, I think that we're all middle-aged now and just dealing with that, dealing with the trauma of being middle-aged. And yeah, just being parents, being working, having a job so that we can provide for our families. And yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's really beautiful is that between me and my siblings, we have 13 children, and I only have 2. I wish I had one more, but anyway, there's 13 kids, and most of them are like really close. And I really love that, that they have their cousins and they're pretty close. And we have a lot of them are in college right now. My niece just graduated from university, and it just makes me really happy, to be able to see that we have been able to give our children the love and the support and the stability that we did not have as children. And also to be able to see the next generation that's going to college, and that, they're going to be working professionals, and that makes me really happy.
I'm a little jealous. I want to be part of that family. But thank you so much. Thank you for letting me moderate this. I'm going to pass it back off to Maddie. Thank you again, Reyna. I want to be friends now.
Of course.
Yes, so we have just about 5 minutes left. So I have a question. It says, I understand that you are a teacher and have been for many years. How do your experiences in your journey influence your work? And specifically, how has it changed your teaching style and your relationship with your students?
Yeah, well, when I first started teaching, I was a middle school teacher, and that was really tough, teaching middle school. But I taught all the immigrant kids, so I taught beginning ESL. And I was really happy to be able to like help those kids, that were like, I saw myself in them, right? These kids that were struggling in English, and to like feel that they belonged here. And I try to give them as much support as I could. And it's funny because now that like they're all like adults now, and I'm constantly getting like friends requests on Facebook from my students from middle school. So I'm happy that they still remember me. And then after middle school, I taught at an adult school. So I was teaching English as a second language at an adult school. And that was kind of interesting because I got to see my parents in my students. These were adults who would come into my classroom after working all day long, and they were really tired, but they were determined to learn English so that they could help their children and get better jobs. And it was really rewarding for me to be able to work with that population. And nowadays I teach creative writing. So now I'm actually teaching writers, and that's been really fun, because I get to talk a lot about the craft in the business of writing, and I get to see and support my students who are working on their own books. So being able to give them that support has been also very rewarding for me.
That's great. Feels like you've gotten different types of fulfillment from each piece of your career as a teacher. Well, Ariel, definitely thank you so much for moderating, and Reyna, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us today. I know we've gotten such amazing feedback from the group, and it was an honor to have this opportunity to meet with you and to put a face to the story and cherish all of your memories together. So thank you so much. And what an amazing way for us to close out Hispanic Heritage Month this week. So we appreciate it, and thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to thank VF, Ariel, Maddie. Thank you so much for doing this. Reyna, thank you so much. Everyone out there in the YouTube world, I just put up A Ballad of Love and Glory. You can click the link and buy it. Pre-order it now. It'll help Reyna out. We love pre-orders.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
I'm looking over here like it makes sense too. That's where the YouTube screen is. Anyway, this was lovely. It's such a great talk. It's always a pleasure for me to sit back and just hear people talk about books. I'm usually the one doing the moderating. So good job, Ariel. Reyna, thank you. This was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, everyone
Thank
out
you,
there,
Adam.
have a great night. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.